Well, hello this afternoon. I'm really delighted that I'm hosting this fireside chat with Alex Mahone. Today, we are looking at innovation in the workplace and building an inclusive culture. And that's through using the lens of creativity, culture, and challenging the norms to deliver better outcomes for colleagues, clients, and consumers. And I'm absolutely delighted that Alex has agreed to do the fireside chat with me. So for those of you who don't know Alex, she is the first female CEO of Channel 4 in its almost 40-year history. So this is amazing because she brings experience from an exceptional career in the intersection where technology meets creativity. And in her previous roles as CEO of Shine and Foundry has demonstrated success in that sector. And what is really inspiring is that she's a PhD physicist. Channel 4 is such a well-established organisation embedded as part of UK culture since the early 80s. And the culture and the purpose around Channel 4 is all around creating change through entertainment. And Alex, you articulate this as being about innovation, taking creative risks and inspiring positive change, and to ensure that all of Great Britain is represented in the programmes. And so I'd like to unpick that a little bit, if that's okay with you. But before I do, could you share, in your words, a little bit more about Channel 4's purpose and what's really important to you in terms of values or the foundations that build that?
Hi, Bina. Thanks for having me. I'm hoping by next year we can do this in real life again. Yeah, it's complicated, Channel 4, isn't it? Because it's a special thing and it's set up to challenge and to do new things and to stand up for people who maybe aren't heard elsewhere. So we articulate by that by saying that, our vision is to create change. But ultimately, to create change, obviously, that change should be change that generates a positive social impact. And that we're doing that by representing unheard voices, by challenging with purpose. There's no point in just challenging like a teenager, right? You want to be challenging in some way that actually has a purpose to it. And to kind of reinvent entertainment. So to always be looking for the new ways to do things, the innovative ways, the fresh ways, so that we, as a brand, as an organization, are challenging, we're reinventing, and we're representing. And then we think about those as the purpose and the focus, both internally in how we do things and externally in terms of what people see on screen and what viewers tune in for.
And I think that's really interesting, Alex, because we talk about the UK being a global leader in innovation. And we talk about the sectors, exactly the ones that you represent, technology, creativity. And I love the way you articulate that sort of challenge, reinvention, and representation. And I know you as an organisation, under your leadership, have really replicated that, not just within, but outside. So as we think about sort of innovation and taking that creative risk, you've got your digital first public sector broadcaster strategy as part of your Future 4. And then we'll talk a little bit later about the 4 All UK. Could you share how you have embedded that right at the core of things like building products and services? How have you embedded that into the reinvention, as you talk about, and the representation?
Well, I think you're right to pick up there on the sort of global impact that Britain can have, and especially what is that in post-Brexit Britain. And we have tremendous impact in our creative industries, which for the past 20, 30 years, certainly all the time I've been in them, have been on this crescendo of growing, are now, a rival to Hollywood. And we're really at a tipping point of this being embedded in the UK for generations to come. And that is about our ability in this country to have skills, and those skills are from theatre, they're from 100 years of the BBC, and also to have the ability to own intellectual property, create new ideas, and work with the hundreds of production companies we work with who have the skills to export them. So it's a combination of our skills base and our innovation and intellectual property. And of course, as you point out, now with digital skills, our horizons, if you like, are unlimited in terms of our ability to export them. So for us, that comes to putting new ideas on air and then working with partners to get them out in the rest of the world. But whereas there used to be many more barriers to that, now there aren't. So an example from our business is we have a new team called 4 Studio based in Leeds, 70 or 80 digital natives who work in that, the average age of that team is like 26. We started up in the past year. They have become in a year the social brand and publisher with the highest reach amongst 18 to 34-year-olds in the UK. But actually about 70 to 80% of their views are ex-UK, because that brand is able to create things on TikTok, on Snap, on Insta, even on ye olde Facebook. And they are able to be seen in lots and lots of other territories. And they come to seek out the creativity of this country and the brands of this country. So we can get ourselves to be a global content partner in terms of what we export and what people see elsewhere. And of course, UK content is very trusted. It's trusted because there is quality in the way that public service broadcasters generate information and report on things. But it's also very high quality in terms of the caliber of the storytelling, the craft that goes behind it. So we have tremendous advantages in this country, and you will start to see in many creative companies the ability to export.
And I think the export agenda is very timely right now as we look to these incredible range of trade agreements that are being negotiated. And we know that the majority of services over the next 5 to 10 years will be digital services. So absolutely right for someone like Channel 4. So as we talk about that, and you talk about the sort of the broader market that you can touch, how do you or how do your teams really sort of ensure that they're resonating with all the audiences that they are going to be connecting with? I mean, we're already seeing on the screen, it's visible, it's clear. Channel 4's done, really made headway in that way. But how do they keep themselves focused on, that focus around all audience?
Well, one of the things we're not short of at Channel 4 is feedback. So everyone's got a point of view about Channel 4. Everyone you meet at a bus stop, everyone you meet in the days when we could go to a bar. So I guess the key thing is to really survey that feedback properly. This is where data comes into it. So we do a lot of things. Of course, daily, one sees data. What was the performance on our streaming platform All 4 last night? I've already seen all those numbers for today. What was the performance on traditional television last night on each of the shows? I've already seen all of those. So actually, there's a very short feedback loop on immediate data, just like retail point of sale. Then you have like waves of surveys that we do throughout the year, particular public impact surveys on pieces of content. So earlier this year, we worked with Russell T Davies to make a show called It's a Sin about the impact of AIDS in the 1980s, the first global pandemic, and what that meant. And then we do big sort of studies about what that meant to people and how it impacted them. But we do waves of research every quarter about how many people were on screen in the top 100 shows, how many people of certain ethnicities were on screen, how many women of certain ages were on screen, what was the sexuality of characters represented on screen, how many people had visible disabilities. So we compare that to targets to make sure we're genuinely representing. And then we do surveys to hear from those groups, from people with protected characteristics, how they feel about what we do on screen. So we're not short of feedback, but I think it's really important to set yourself targets there and then to continually measure yourself and hold yourself to account and then work out what we should do next. Next Friday, we have, in fact, in the week of this Friday, we have the Black to Front project, which is on Friday, where all shows will be fronted by Black talent on screen for the day. So you're going to switch on Channel 4. It's not like we're watching BET, which is the only other place you can find this. You switch on a mainstream channel, all the talent on air will be Black for the day, but all the crews, as much as possible behind the scenes, will also be Black. That's going to change with Legacy. The impact of the day will be that people will have had better credits. They'll have been brought into the industry. They'll have worked on different crews. So you start to change the possibilities for people to get employed over time. The question for us is, what do we do next? How do we do more of that? And then how do we check that it's actually landing with the audiences in the right way?
And I think I love the way you bring the on-screen diversity and inclusiveness into how you work behind the scenes. So I guess what would be really interesting to understand is what impact have you seen on your talent? So, what are you seeing through your talent and the business with this sort of, with this approach and this strategy?
So I think you see a number of things. I think any business that is taking seriously its inclusion and diversity journey sees this. So you see a stage where people are angry and frustrated because they've got demands and they've got points of view and they haven't been listened to for some time. I mean, I see that in all the businesses that start that. There are people who are going, oh, what do we do about this? And there are other people going, well, here's a list. Here's all the things you could have done, you should have done. And anyone who is in an underrepresented group knows that feeling. So you see that stage. Then you see teams open up and people be more honest, more authentic, and hopefully get the organization to a stage where it is genuinely more inclusive, which you can measure by how much people feel they can be their authentic selves in the office, or what is the gap between how their family would see them and how their colleagues would see them. You know, you see that sort of change in ability to bring inclusivity into the work environments. Then I think you see better ideas. You have a team that's more diverse, so you get better ideas because it's more creative, because you have a bigger range and often more honest. And we've definitely seen that even in how we've moved across the UK. Like before, 3 years ago, we were really a London-based organization. Now we have 5 offices across the UK. We've got almost 400 roles in Leeds. You know, we're just seeing in Leeds and Glasgow and Manchester and Bristol, we're just seeing this massive shift in how the organization makes decisions, because they're not all made by people who live in the same postcode in London. They're made by people with a range of tastes and opinions. So you get that sort of change in how decisions are made. And then, you know, as leaders, you get what you need to do next, because staff tell you. Because once people are allowed to speak up without fear of retribution, which is always hard to fully remove, you get a big old list of what you should be doing. And the question is, where do you channel resources and what can you do next to make differences?
Absolutely, absolutely, because targets are there to hold us accountable, but it's actually the lived experience on the ground that really dictates it. So it resonates with what I see, and I absolutely agree with you. Diverse teams, I see it every day in my boardroom. The diversity of thinking and the challenge you get from that. So just flipping that a little bit, culture is absolutely fundamental, right, to the success of the business. And it reflects our values and the foundations of how we show up and how we behave. How would you describe Channel 4's values?
Well, everyone who ever ends up working at Channel 4 is different to the norm. And to be honest, you end up with an organization of people who are quite outspoken, who are full of ideas, who in some way the purpose of the brand resonates with. Like, I haven't found anyone who works here who hasn't got that feeling, who can talk about like when they first saw something on the screen that made a difference to their lives. It was on Channel 4. So compared to some companies where you have to work quite hard to sort of go, what's our purpose, what's the feeling? We don't have any of that, right? Because it's a purpose-led organization and people really care about it. And nobody ends up here if they don't feel that combination of public service, but also alternative and kind of speaking up. So that's good. You have that within the culture. And my job is to help unlock that ability of the culture to be inclusive and to allow people to speak and to generate ideas and to try and make that coalesce together into a similar direction. And a lot of the way we see that in our culture is by employee resource groups. Like, we have very, very strong groups who are put together by the staff. And often the ideas for what to do next come from them, and they don't come from me. So, you know, we have a really, really strong women's group for women, and it was them who came up with the idea for us to be the first to do a menopause policy. Now everybody's talking about menopause. But like 2 years ago when we launched that menopause policy, and a year ago when we made it free to other companies, it was a really radical thing to do. And then we've put that in our shows with like Davina McCall's Sex, Myths in the Menopause, massively popular, like leading to all kinds of changes in the way people can talk about that. We've just done a pregnancy loss policy. The idea for doing that came from that team, and that's about if you miscarry, if you lose a baby, but also if you have an abortion, like what does that mean? How can you return to work? What benefits do you get? You know, that's quite radical stuff. But what I'm delighted is other organizations adopt that. We obviously have a very strong disability group for Purple who are super active in helping us think about how we do things like cover the Paralympics. How should we be challenging ourselves internally to make change to the work environment? And actually, over the past year, staff have suggested 2 new groups, not me. Like, one group, particularly during the pandemic, was called For Parents and Carers.
Yeah.
Recognition from people that the pressures were different from parents and carers. Not to say that others didn't have pressures, but that they needed a group and a safe space in which to discuss that. And most recently, the teams have said actually there needs to be a men's group called The Shed. And actually, there needs to be a safe space for men to discuss what their issues are. You know, it's really interesting given everything that's happened in other groups and people feeling that they need space to discuss their issues. And I love the fact that others come up with these ideas, and my only job is to say, yeah, great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. The power of employee groups or networks, whatever we call them, is so important. And we've seen that obviously in the last couple of years, even more so. But you're absolutely right, because inclusion is about how you embrace differences. And sometimes you have to be in these networks to be able to voice them. And as you say, if you do that, then you have the confidence and you clearly have an environment that promotes openness and honesty and speaking
And it's
up.
not perfect, right? It's not a perfect environment. But I think that, just touching on something you said there, I think it's about getting people comfortable with uncomfortable conversations.
Absolutely.
And accepting that there will be dissonance and there will be things that you haven't done and there will be people who are unhappy, but creating an ability to allow that discourse to happen. And you know, we do a lot of surveys, particularly during the lockdown periods, being out of office, and we've just done a focused one on inclusion. And I read all the comments that people put in verbatim, and sometimes I feel, you know, I'm like, oh, that's okay, you know, oh, that's a lot of comments to read, because obviously negative comments are in there. But it's really important that you do that, and then you feed them back to all the managers, and then you talk about what needs to be the program of change next. You can't just take the survey and pop it in a drawer.
I agree with you, and there are nuances depending on who you're talking to, because it's big being able to pick those up. I just want to pick up on the point around inspiring positive change, which, you know, I'm hearing lots of it, and I think there's a lot to learn from that for our organisations. And I guess, how have you, in your tenure, helped create that culture internally? And I hear openness, encouraging, talking together, but it's more than that, isn't it? How do you sort of open that up? And as a leader, you clearly use that as well.
Well, I think, because this is like one of those questions where you have to ask my staff what they think, and they might tell you something different. I think part of that's being able to take the hard questions head on. I think part of that is people are allowed to ask you things. So there's a part of that that's being approachable. There's a part of that that's being honest in your communications to your team. So, for example, we switched to, God, I think at one point we had weekly all staffs, but you know, we switched from sort of doing big quarterly things to broadcasting from home all the time. And I went through a phase where everyone was allowed to submit any question, and I would take and answer all the questions on air. So that's just about, you can ask whatever question it is, no matter how difficult. I'll read it out verbatim, and then I'll give you the answer to 1,000 people or so. That's sort of part of that. You know, it's sometimes saying as a leader, I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to find out. You know, or you know, we didn't do our best there. I think there's sometimes about admitting where you're not perfect, which is part of it. I think for all of us, there's been a degree of ensuring that one can respond and show empathy and understand people's situations, particularly during the pandemic. Like, we put in place lots of extra days off, put in place like lunch times, protected hour and a half, where I said nobody could have any meetings because we were in real phase of Zoom fatigue. Put in place meeting-free Fridays, just they actually try and stop scheduling meetings. But I had to police that quite a lot because people can still bosses still keep trying to schedule meetings. You know, to try and just be honest that people needed a bit of space to breathe. And particularly when, remember, like in January, February this year, where it was just like, are we into another lockdown? And people just felt like they couldn't breathe. So, you know, how do we make a change in the day so people can get fresh air? Like, I mean, there's small things in many ways, but part of that, I think, is just articulating a genuine recognition and empathy for how we're all feeling. I think those things make a difference, but you'd have to ask the challenge for staff.
We will do, but I think that absolutely is right. The smallest things can actually have the biggest impact, and culture does take a long time to change. And as you look forward to the future? I mean, there's a lot of, commentary around Channel 4 and what that might mean for the organisation. And as a public sector broadcaster, whether it's in private, but it doesn't really matter. I guess for you as the CEO, as you look forward, what are the one or two things that you're looking to build on? Because you've already started to build a solid foundation. What are the one or two priorities for you as you go look forward and as you become more digitized as well?
Well, I think at the moment, there's all the content in the world, right? If you go home tonight, well, maybe you are at home already. When you think, what will I watch? You'll be like, oh, I'm overwhelmed by choice. There's this massive abundance of things we could watch on our screens, but there's a genuine desire from the audience to see things that come from our perspective, not Channel 4's perspective, the national perspective, that go from Britain out, not in a parochial way, but that understand who we are and come from that perspective. And we had tremendous success with that last year and this year. In fact, the first half of this year has been our best in 7 years. And last year we had tremendous growth. But we had that success because we thought about how the public felt. And we made a lot of shows that were reflecting how we feel as a nation right now. So I think there's still, if you go on themes going forwards, there is still, and there will continue to be, a tremendous desire from the British public to see shows that come from the perspective of who we are in the world and what our place is in this country. And whether that be about our country, or whether it be made by people from the rest of the world. So I think that desire remains very, very strong. And there is tremendous content on Netflix, but it's from a sort of outside-in global perspective. And that's a real difference that you see in the audience. And the second thing I think is young people, is like not giving up on them. For us, that's more than half our audience, 18 to 34s. And all for our streaming service, 80% of young people in the UK are registered with it. We are a massive brand for speaking to them. I think last year, of the 25 most young skewing shows on television, 23 of them were on our channels. So we speak to them, they come to our news, our social content that we put out is very, very attractive to them. And they are the most digitally savvy. They are the people who aren't sort of fooled by internet fake news. It's not, young people want quality content, and they want facts, and they want the correct information. And social media platforms are not playing to that, and they're not necessarily helping with that, because they are, by their very nature, divisive, because they speak to smaller and smaller groups. And what we are is inclusive, and we are building bridges between people and between generations, partly because what we put out is the same to everyone, as opposed to specialized to small groups. Yeah. And so I would say, like, another theme which completely plays to digital is don't give up on that generation. Don't give up on the millennials and younger, because they want quality and they appreciate it when they see it. You just have to work harder to find them, to be in the form that they want. And that's what we're good at doing. So I think whatever happens, those are the themes going forward for us.
And that's brilliant. Thank you. And as we look forward, there's just one other thing I'd like to ask you before we wrap up. As the audience here listening to this chat, what learnings would you share? Because everything you have done in your business, inside and in terms of what you're projecting and how you are located across the country, it's inclusive in every lens you look. So as business leaders take that away, because it is on the agenda of everybody I speak to, what are the learnings that you'd like to share about how you think about inclusivity, everything you do? So we often talk about colleagues, we talk about customers, we talk about general public. That's quite a big range, but it actually, what you've been able to demonstrate is that you are doing it. You're living and breathing it.
Oh, so, I mean, that's going to sound bland or banal, but I guess it's all about people. So it's investing in people and communicating to people and remembering that's all your business is. It's like, who's your team and how do you try to help them unlock their own potential? That maybe sounds like too much like something you might read on the back of a business book in the airport. But it's sort of like, how can you think about what the organization can do for the people in it? And I think that's a constant work in progress. Right?
No, it is. But
how can you provide opportunities?
But you've shared, the challenging the norm. You talked about your colleagues are different to the norm. So you're bringing in that diversity, whether you're doing it consciously or not, it doesn't matter. You're bringing in that difference and you're accepting that difference and you're leveraging that difference. So I don't think it sounds bland. It does make sense. Does make sense.
Good.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, but thank you very much, Alex, for making time to talk today. I've certainly found it incredibly insightful and informative, and I'm sure those watching will find it as well. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you.